Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Eternal Life Plan. Thank you for joining me this evening, and we already have comments started. Thank you, everyone. So I know you're wondering, why was I triggered about Church Militant? What was that all about? Well, I have said in other podcasts that I am a huge Sean Ryan fan, and I watch every one of his episodes on YouTube, and he interviews a lot of different people. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I would strongly recommend watching his videos. He is a former Navy SEAL, and he also worked for the CIA as well. His own story is fascinating, but he interviews fascinating people that by chance most have never heard of. And one of these people, which I don't know why I've not heard of him, is a man that is an expert in the world of deprogramming people. And the specific episode that I watched, as I'm watching this 3-hour episode, and usually with Sean's videos, I'll break them up where I'll watch maybe an hour to hour and a half every single night, because he puts out 1 or 2 a week, and that's it. And his videos can go on for 6 hours, his interviews. This one particular one, though, is a 3-hour interview, and I sat and watched it all. I didn't go to bed till like 1:30 in the morning watching it, and every part of this video, I was going, oh my gosh, this is Church Militant. This is Michael Voris. This is that. I was amazed. Now, maybe I shouldn't have been. Maybe it's because I'm naive. I don't know. I had people in the past emailing me and telling me that they thought that Church Militant is a cult. And after watching the interview on Sean Ryan, he interviewed cult expert Rick Ross. I was convinced after seeing that there's a strong possibility that Church Militant could be a cult, or was a cult, I should say. So I want to share with you some clips and some longer versions in the interview that I want to show you. Sean Ryan is generous, where what he does is after an episode, he shares maybe 10 clips that anyone can download and use in their video podcast, as long as you contribute. Excuse me. Here I go again. As long as you give him credit that it came from one of his podcasts. So I've downloaded 3 clips that I want to show you, and then I've earmarked 2 clips on the actual interview that I want to play in greater lengths for you. And I will stop and start these clips to fill in my experience with Church Militant and why it fits so well. So let me share with you the first clip, which is the definition of a cult.
Destructive cult, which is number 1, an absolute totalitarian leader that becomes an object of worship, that is the defining element and driving force of the group. And 2, that leader knowingly uses thought reform and coercive persuasion to gain undue influence over his followers. And then 3, That leader uses the undue influence that he possesses to exploit and do harm to his followers. And you take those three things together, and I don't care what the name of the group is and what they say they believe, that is simply the window dressing, the facade. Beyond that mask are those three core characteristics.
Okay. Now, let me go into the cult groups that Rick Ross, excuse me, has done pre deprogramming of members. So people have reached out to him to get him involved in getting their loved ones away from these cult groups. And the first one is he talks about is Jehovah Witness, then Scientology, then it's called Nexum, but it's spelled N-X-I-V-M, Nexum. And here's an interesting thing. After watching this interview, there was an experiential workshop that I did, gosh, almost 20 years ago that loosely was based around this Nexium model, and it disguises itself as business leadership training, and no, it's anything but that. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Then he did a deprogramming on someone in the 12 tribes, and then the Waco massacre of the Branch Davidians led by David Koresh, and Jonestown massacre. He talks about Jim Jones in the Jonestown massacre. Here's another interesting side note. Jim Jones came to my high school and spoke. Yep, I went to a Catholic high school, and he came to our high school and spoke to our class. I can't remember what grade I was in when he came, but when this all unfolded later and the news about him came out, I mean, I was like, I told my dad, I said, my gosh, that's the same guy that came and spoke at our school. And I went to Catholic school. And this was just in the beginning when Jim Jones was getting started and preaching and doing all of that. Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to play you a longer clip. Okay.
Well, if you get involved with a group and the group is obsessed with a leader, and that leader has no accountability, and that leader seems to be an object of worship, that would be a red flag.
All right. That really resonated with me about Michael Voris. No accountability. He has no accountability at all at Church Militant. And my guess is at his new enterprise, his new apostolate, he doesn't have any accountability there either.
Another red flag would be, is this group, do they encourage people to become socially isolated?
And that was true at Church Militant too. Because of, you all had to move to Detroit, and because the wages were so bad and there was no health insurance that was offered other than they would give you a stipend, which wouldn't cover any kind of health insurance at all. And of course, Michael had health insurance paid for. And so they worked such long hours. And because of the low wages, they they all had to find roommates with each other in order to share rent expenses because they couldn't afford to live on their own in Detroit. And the isolation was to keep everybody in check.
That is, when you become involved with the group, they're kind of dissing your old friends and your family, and they're encouraging you to make your life totally within this new social environment. That type of environment control, that type of social isolation would be another warning sign. And is the leader open to criticism? Is the group open to criticism?
There's another point too that I went, aha. No, the group, so Voris was never open to criticism or feedback of any kind at all. And neither were the managers, and neither was the group.
Or do they characterize it in some negative way and dismiss it and, basically denigrate anyone that questions them? Because typically a group will have accountability for its leadership. That may be democratic governance, financial transparency, and groups you can be involved in an organization and still be very active with your family, your old friends, people that become cut off and isolated because of a group. That is a really big warning flag.
So what was typical at Church Militant is the staffers, we were told nothing. We had no idea about any type of management decisions that was going on. If we seemed to change course all of a sudden in a new direction, we were never told why. We were never explained why this decision was made. We were not allowed to ask those types of questions. We weren't privy to know anything. All we were to do was do what we were told. And that was prevalent my very first week working there. And as I have shared in my other videos about Church Militant, the longer that I went up once a month for a week. And the other 3 weeks I worked from 8 in the morning till 6 at night at home. And they knew if I was on that computer or not. They knew if I was working or not. So it wasn't like other people have said about me that I worked part-time. I did not. I worked full-time. But once a month, I went up to Church Militant in Detroit for a week and worked in the studio. And I'm telling you, every week or every month that I went up there for a week, I just kept getting a more sinking feeling about it. Remember, I only worked there for 5 months, although they make you agree that you have to stay 2 years. And I was not going to keep that agreement because of the way that I was being treated and the way I saw other people being treated.
Something's amiss.
How early does that kind of happen? Does that happen early on, or is that they ease people into it?
I would say that they ease people into it, and that's what I think people don't recognize, is that it's indoctrination incrementally. It's a slow drip, and you get involved. But I would say if your family starts to question and your old friends start to question what you're involved with, depending on their closeness to you and their concerns, that could be something that the group will become very concerned about very early on. Because what they want, these groups, is they want you to not have feedback from people outside of the group's control. What they want is for you to be embedded within this environment that they control, where the only feedback you hear is reinforcement from other group members and the leader. So when your family begins to question the group and old friends begin to ask critical questions, and the group responds by saying, well, you need to really kind of cut them off, that is a very much an early warning sign that could be a kind of tripwire.
Now, I shared with someone at Church Militant that some of my close friends had said to me, how can you work for Church Militant? And the answer I got from Mary McCann was, well, they just don't understand what we're all about. They just don't understand that. You know, you're here because you're serving God. No, we weren't. We were serving Michael Voris.
To notify you, this is a problem. This group is a problem.
Okay.
All right. Now, I want to play you another short clip.
Persuadable, that nothing can persuade you. You are not recognizing your own vulnerability to the extent that you have made yourself more vulnerable to a cult group. I mean, look, there would be no advertising or negative political ads if people were not persuadable. So what these groups do is they create a kind of synthesis of coercive persuasion, thought reform, understood influence techniques that they knowingly use, and they focus it like a laser on someone.
And what Church Militant did was we were serving Catholics. We were serving Catholics because the bishops weren't doing it. And we were the heroes, right? Which was just a total lie, We were serving Michael Voris. That's who we were serving. All right, now let's get to the next longer stream I want to show you. Whoops, I'm streaming the wrong one. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
Speaking of the brainwashing stuff, how does the thought reform or brainwashing, how do they start that process? Can we just go through the whole thing?
There have been books and research done about the process of manipulation that is orchestrated, mandated systematically within cult groups. For example, the book Coercive Persuasion by Edgar Schein, a psychologist, a professor at MIT, and the books Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism by the psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton, who taught at Harvard. And so these books inform, in large part, our understanding. Another excellent book is Influence by Robert Cialdini, which explores the basic structure of influence, the 6 principles, as he would identify them. So by understanding this research, this body of research, we can better understand what happens to people in destructive cults. Schein would say there are 3 stages of coercive persuasion. First, you break people down. Then
the breaking down is what happened in that experiential group that I was involved in about 20 years ago. Was called Paradigm Shift. And this is a brutal story that I want to share with you real quick. There's different levels that you go into. There's level 1, 2, and 3, and you are actually sequestered in this room with all these other people, and there's about 30 in this first group, and you can't leave. I mean, you are under their control. And the whole point of this group is to break through your barriers. And my gym instructor was the one that invited me to go to this, and I went, and someone came in a few minutes late, and they had already started the program, and the speaker stopped when this man walked in, had him come up to the front, and just degraded him in front of everybody, saying, "Oh, you must think you're so important that you can walk in a few minutes late and think that's okay. Where else is this showing up in your life?" And just kept badgering this man. And then he tried to leave. He goes, "Oh no, you can't leave." And the people that were there, volunteers that were there, formed this circle around this man and wouldn't let him leave. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what did I get involved in here? It was extremely uncomfortable. So they break you down, as Rick Ross said, and then after the 3-day weekend, then they build you back up. And you're, now you're the new Christine, and you're good to go, which was a total farce.
When they are broken down, you then provide the means.
Ever catch yourself working late, your family already asleep, and wonder, why am I still doing this?
And the process of change that
I don't have YouTube premium, so sorry for the ad interruption.
you want, and they become changed. You manipulate them in that diminished, broken state to be changed. And then after that, you refreeze them in that changed state, which is accomplished in large part by social isolation, peer reinforcement, and so on. So what happens to people in a group, like I'll give you an example. Synanon was a drug rehab community that then became a destructive cult founded by Charles Diedrich in California. And they came up with what is called attack therapy, or the hot seat. So they would take a member of the community, put them in the center of a circle of people, and those people would bombard them with everything that was wrong with them.
Yes, and that happened in Paradigm Shift too. They would bring everyone up one at a time and tell them everything that was wrong with them. It was unbelievable.
Everything they needed to look at, to change. And so they would break them down. And then once they were broken, and groups have various processes by which they break people down, then you are open to change because you feel I'm broken. I am desperate for answers. Help me. So you're in distress. And then the group offers you the program, the means by which you can address your broken state and make yourself whole. And then subsequently, you become part of this kind of subculture or community of like-minded people who reinforce that changed state of being and keep you in that state of change, in that program.
And that's what happened at Paradigm Shift. They would convince you that you needed to go to the next level. Then you need to go to the next level after that. And then after the third level, I'm like, all right, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this anymore. This isn't helping. And I know you all are probably saying I quit the first night, right? But one good thing came out of that experience is my good friend Janine. And, even though this happened 20 years ago, her and I have always stayed in contact. And periodically, we'll talk about our experience at Paradigm and why did we allow this to happen? Why did we allow them to do this to us? They were more brutal on Janine than they were me. And I don't know why, other than she's a wealthy woman. She's had plastic surgery, and they picked on her just every opportunity they could. And she was going through a really bad divorce. And I'll never forget this one time they brought her up, and Jim Zarvos, who was the leader of this group, who owns this business. And I looked it up. It's still out there going strong. He actually, brought her up and said, "No wonder your husband wants to divorce you. No wonder your husband had an affair on you." I mean, it was so cruel. I couldn't believe it. It was awful. And you're in this environment. You're cut off. I mean, they even blacked out the windows. That's how secluded you were. They blacked out the windows. You weren't allowed to tell anybody about what was going on. You weren't allowed to tell anyone about the experiences and these experiential exercises that they put us through. You weren't allowed to discuss anything about the program, period. Nothing. Well, is there any surprise that I think it was in level 2, all of a sudden, all of these men who were married men, they weren't there with their wives, but they were married men, decided that they were now gay. And I'm like, what in the world? No, you're not gay. And they twisted you up in a pretzel so bad that you didn't even know who you were. And I'll tell you what happened to me. I am not proud of this. Matter of fact, I confessed it. So they turned me against the Catholic Church. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, I've got to reform the Catholic Church. I've got to do this against the Catholic Church. Who the heck am I to even talk like that? And I went with my partner to a mass and disrupted the mass. Can you believe that, everyone? When I think back on it now, what in the world was I thinking? So I'm susceptible to this, right? So of course I became susceptible when it came to Church Militant. And my friend Janine, her and I are having lunch on Monday. She went to a restaurant with her partner, and they would make you do things that would just embarrass you. And what they would do is they would send one of their volunteers to check in on you just to make sure that you were doing what you committed to do. And they told her she had to, because she's a beautiful woman, very classy, very elegant. They told her with her partner that they paired her up with, Don, his name was Don, and who's passed away, God rest his soul. Oh, that poor man, what he went through. They had to go to an Italian restaurant and eat spaghetti without a fork or any utensils. So they had to put their hands behind their back and eat just with their mouth a full plate of spaghetti. Yeah. That's the crazy things that they would have us do. For me, I had to go to Catholic church and interrupt the mass. I am embarrassed and ashamed I ever did that, everyone. And I did go to confession about it. I mean, you get sucked into these groups and it's like you don't know how to leave. And that gets us to our next video.
Loyal enough, very similar to people in abusive, controlling relationships, looking at themselves and saying, look, it's really my fault what happened, instead of looking at the person who was an abusive, controlling partner or the organization that was abusive and controlling, and recognizing that they were to blame and that the person who was hurt is really a victim. So for people leaving cults, it's a process of sorting it out, of deprogramming themselves.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened to Hunter Bradford. When he tried to leave Church Militant and he went up to Michael's office to tell him he was turning in his resume, he made Hunter Bradford feel like this and was angry at Hunter and yelling at Hunter, had Hunter in tears. And then he told Hunter that he had to agree to see him after work, and Hunter agreed to it. And then Michael was nice about it and why he should stay and what his future at Church Militant, right? And this is what they do. Thank God that I left after 5 months and I didn't stay any longer than that. And the people that worked there were good people. Good people that thought that they were working to serve Catholics, and they were really working to serve Voris. In this interview, he goes into this group that's called, let me pull up my notes, the 12 tribes. And he goes into detail about how these people that worked for the 12 tribes did not make a living wage and they had no health insurance. That was Church Militant to the T. And it was really, their situation was a much more dire situation than at Church Militant. And they referred to the leader as the authority. Well, don't forget, I was told on day one when I started at Church Militant that I was not to look at Michael. I was not to ask Michael a question. I was not, allowed to get his attention because he's a very important man. That's what Mary McCann told me. So these are some of the warning signs, which is why I'm doing this video. It triggered me so much watching this from start to finish because all I kept thinking of was Michael Voris and Jim Zarvos, a paradigm shift. During, it was either level 1 or level 2, one of the women that was in our group tried to commit suicide because she could not take the badgering that was going on. Oh my gosh, I felt so sorry for her. She ended up leaving and then suing Jim Zarvos. I don't know whatever happened to that at all, but there were a lot of people that had some breakdowns. And before you went to orientation, you had to fill out, it was like a 15-page questionnaire. Janine and I have talked about this too, about how they ask you the most intimate personal questions. And I remember filling this out thinking, well, why do they need to know this? Why do they need to know that? I can't tell you, or I can tell you that I didn't put a lot of detail into that form at all because I was skeptical of how they were going to use it. And what they would do is the volunteers, who were called seniors, would get together and they would target people based on what was in that form, on what they were going to denigrate them on, degrade them on. And this was the hypocrisy of it. You couldn't smoke and you couldn't drink during the entire level 1, which I don't remember if it was a 6 or an 8 week or a 12-week program. It was over a bunch of weeks. And you had a senior that you had to report into on a regular basis. And so one time I was looking for my senior to ask a question. It was during the weekend where we were doing the workshop. I was looking for my senior and I went out back, the forbidden zone. I wasn't supposed to go in the back. And there they were out there talking about people and laughing at them and smoking and drinking wine. So talk about total hypocrisy. And that was in level 3. And that's when I told Janine, I said, this is ridiculous. You know what they're doing out back? They're making fun of us drinking and smoking. So I'm telling you, it's beware. It's disguised as a Catholic apostolate serving Catholics. It's disguised as a business leadership program. Oh my gosh, it's described as serving God, right? So many things. I can't recommend you all watching this interview sometime in the future. It will really open your eyes. All right, now I will get to your comments and questions. Hi, Alan. Okay, we'll see you later. Can't do it. I see you've got other plans. Well, life happens. I don't expect you guys to watch it every time I go live because I know you have lives. Kayla. Hey, yeah, how are those fingers going of yours? Trey Blanton, another Church Militant former employee who I think the world of. And here I was thinking I'd be able to get through Advent and Christmas without having to think about the cult of Horus. Sorry, Trey. And you know what? It was a year ago during this time at Thanksgiving time that all of this happened at Church Militant. Hi, Lou. Good evening to you too. Truth Seeker says CM was absolutely a cult. Yeah, I believe after watching this video with Rick Ross, I believe you're absolutely true. Now, I know some people had told me this early on when I was reporting on all of this that was going on at Church Militant. But to be honest with you, I just wasn't convinced yet. But now I'm totally convinced. And the fact that Voris has taken all of those enablers with him to Texas to start new, it's just more of the same, everyone. Nothing has changed. He's still operating the very same way. Lou says, check, check, check. Yep. Mega Man is testing. Lou, Jim Jones, speaking of a Catholic high school, is so wrong on so many levels. Yeah, you know, I never ever got why he was allowed to speak there. That really threw me for a loop. And you know, Lou, in high school, you think I'm naive now? Oh my gosh, I was way worse in high school. So, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, well, you know, the principal wants us to hear this. That's what I thought. Trey says constructive criticism was regarded as a demonic attack. That's absolutely right, Trey. There was no constructive criticism at all. I mean, you couldn't even float ideas up for stories. They did not want to have any feedback from anyone at all. Heads down, do what you're told. Juanillo says, oh, shoot, didn't know that. Judy says, this is interesting. You got to watch the whole video, you guys. I can't recommend it enough. Trey, Hunter disrespected women too. He gets little sympathy from me. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Trey. He did disrespect women too. He has, matter of fact, Trey, you probably don't know this, but several of them have come forward and apologized to me about the way they treated me there. Some of the male employees have. So, you know, that was encouraging for me. Trey says he was one of a few final straws for me leaving. I don't know what realization he came to leave, but he has his own issues that I pray he's worked through. Yeah. So without naming names, I know, Trey, and you may not know this, that several people went to Hunter and said, wake up about what's going on. And if I remember right, his family was concerned about him too. Lou says, kind of sounds like EST, Earhart Seminars training in the early 70s. Huh. I'm not familiar with that one, Lou. Not familiar with that one. I'll have to look that one up. Kayla says, fingers doing better. I'm getting a new cast Monday. Hopefully it's a better one. Oh, Kayla, you're on a journey of healing. Hey, Christine, have you sung yet? Have you sung yet, dear angel of music? I don't understand that, Matthew. You'll have to explain it to me. Time for another book on Voris by E. Michael Jones. I'll be honest with you, Mega Man. I am not an E. Michael Jones fan at all. I'm just not. Hey, Christine, let's hope Michael Voris doesn't make you his angel of music. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, Matthew. Kayla, was moving to Texas Voris' plan all along? Well, Voris spent a lot of time in Texas because he has a major donor in the Houston area. So about the time I left, I remember thinking, and I talked to Christine Chrisleep about this too, that I wasn't sure how much longer Church Militant was going to be around. And here's why I say that. You know, he was trying to launch, when I came on board, he was launching evening news. So I did some of the script writing for the evening news programs. And during that 5 months that I worked there, he changed that evening news studio like 6 different times. And it wasn't cheap to keep rearranging that studio the way he was doing it. So I think about maybe the end of the year that I left, I think Voris knew that Church Militant was imploding. That's just my personal view. I have said all along that he had an exit plan. He was tired of doing the vortex every day. We were all required and mandated to be at chapel. We had to go to chapel twice a day, but Voris rarely showed up for chapel. Lots of times he didn't get into the studio until halfway through the day. Now he was doing evening news, so those guys were coming in around 11:30, and they didn't leave until 8 or 8:30 because they were doing evening news live. But at the same time, when evening news went under and they laid everybody else off in March of 2023, Christine Chrisley told me that he was rarely in the studio. And that whole layoff happened at the same time, or right after Hunter Bradford turned in his resignation and left. That's when evening news folded. Coincidence? I don't think so. Christine, at least you didn't have to hear David Berg talk. I don't know who David Berg is either. I don't know what you're talking about, Matthew. Christine, that's the reason I never pledged a sorority. I never could do the group think. Kate, I agree with that. And I'm not a joiner. Typically, I'm not a joiner. Even at Weight Watchers, I can't do the Weight Watchers meetings. I'm just not someone that wants to commit even a half hour once a week. But so that's why I am re-examining how am I susceptible to these kinds of organizations? How am I susceptible to these? Because I'm generally not a joiner either. Oh, sorry, Christine. I was trying to make a I thought it was Phantom of the Opera, but I wasn't 100% sure because I know the woman is named Christine in the Phantom of the Opera. Gerald says Nexium is evil. Oh, do you know about them? I don't know anything about them. So I was really curious about Nexium when Rick Ross was talking about it. And Paradigm Shift did not get into, well, not that I know of, any of the sexual things with the women like they did in Nexium. Oh man, everyone in Nexium, they were branding women as sex slaves. Now, this was supposed to be an executive corporate training system. I mean, that was really sick what they were doing in Nexium. And Rick Ross talks about that in the video, and he talks about, how I don't remember if it was Nexium or someone, I think it was Nexium. He could not deprogram one of the men and, left his family and everything because he just couldn't leave this group. They had him so tight. So, Matthew says, you mentioned Jim Jones, who was a cult leader. David Berg was also a cult leader, but his cult justified child sexual abuse as an act of love. His cult was called Children of God. Yes, I think Rick Ross mentioned Children of God in this. I think he did, but he mostly talked about, and I'll go over it again with the ones that just came on board, mostly talked about the Jehovah Witness, Scientology, NXIVM, the 12 tribes, Waco massacre of the Branch Davidians led by David Koresh, and Jonestown massacre, Jim Jones. You know, the one thing about David Koresh is he did release about 20 of the children, but Jim Jones didn't. I mean, everybody drank the Kool-Aid and, you know, and they had no idea what they were doing. You know, they didn't know they were going to die. That was oh gosh, this just is really disturbing. Okay, everyone. Any other comments? So I want you to watch this interview with Rick Ross. It is just so good and eye-opening. Matthew, controversial question, Christine. Do you think there was any kind of cult around Mother Angelica? I don't know. That I don't know. I don't really know that much about EWTN other than I've watched some of their shows. But I don't know if that's true about Mother Angelica. Why do you say that, Matthew? Because I've not heard anything about any kind of cult issues around her. Now, I do know she was a pretty strong-willed woman. You know, she knew what she wanted and she went after it. Oh, Kayla, will you post interview in this link? Okay, let me do that. Good point, Kayla. Hold on and I will do that. All right, there is the link to the interview, and I will also post it after the show in the show notes so that you can go back after this broadcast is over and you'll see it in the description area of the video. So Matthew says, actually, I think I asked my question with an incorrect understanding of what a cult is exactly. My apologies. Okay. All right, Matthew. Mother was a Spitfire, loved her. Yes, she was. Yes, she was. So, everyone, I hope this enlightened you about one more video about my experience at Church Militant. As I said, the only reason why I did this is because I wanted to give anyone who watches this video the red flags to look out for before you join, and don't misunderstand. Just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean they're ethical. You have got to do your due diligence on your nonprofits, because Church Militant was a nonprofit. So was St. Michael's Media was a nonprofit. And just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean that they're ethical. Just because they've got Catholic in their name or they claim to profess Christianity or Catholicism doesn't mean they're ethical, doesn't mean that they're holy, doesn't mean anything, right? Eternal life plan is forever. Got a plan? Our plan has to be Jesus, and we have to be ethical. We have to be fair in every dealing that we have. Anne says, It's funny, I used to watch every day before all the legal issues, but now when his emails come in, I just hit the delete button without reading it. They still have my email. The fog has lifted. Oh, Ann, I'm so glad the fog has lifted because I still hear from people that are telling me that they're getting emails from Voris. And, you know, the receptionist is now the president of Souls and Liberty. There you go. And, you know, I don't let those people off the hook. The people that followed Voris, I don't let them off the hook. They're enablers and they're just as bad as he is. I'm just going to say it. They're just as bad as he is. Okay, Sadie says, I think this woman has got a couple of screw loose in her head. I think she's a dreamer. She's making up things. Michael Voris, plain and simple, was a homosexual. Why didn't you just let it go? Ladies and gentlemen, would you like to address Sadie? Would you like to address Sadie? Sadie apparently doesn't know who I am. And yes, Voris is a homosexual. No one has ever said that he was. Nobody said he wasn't, Sadie. I don't have a couple of screw loose. I worked there for 5 months. I've talked to a lot of people. Matter of fact, if I had a screw loose, wouldn't, and I'm assuming you're talking about me when you say this, that all of the former employees wouldn't have reached out to me and wanted to be on the show to share their side of the story. You know, a lot of these people that came forward, I did not approach them. They approached me because they wanted to tell their side of the story, Sadie. So unless I misinterpreted you, it sounds like you're talking about me. Are you, Sadie? Can you put that in the comment? I don't know. I guess Sadie isn't going to comment anymore. All right. So as I said, the reason why I did this video is because when I watched Rick Ross being interviewed, who is an expert. The Eagle of the Sacred Heart. You're so right. Is that the same Sadie that was throwing a fit about you criticizing Jesse Romero for lying about Father Carlos Martins? I think you're right. It's the same person, Eagle of the Sacred Heart. You know, she criticizes my videos, but she keeps watching. She just keeps watching. She can't help herself. Kate says, I think it is. So, Sadie, you're being called out. Kayla says, has Jesse apologized? No. And I haven't checked. I think I checked Wednesday or Thursday, and no, he has not. But they did take down the videos, but they haven't taken down the podcast on their show. Yep, she's stalking me, all right, Eagle. Impressive recall. The reason why he knows is because he commented on the comment that Sadie left on my last video about Jesse Romero. She's always criticizing me, but she just keeps watching. So, yep, Blue, I agree. But one more time, the whole point was to help you see the red flags of what a cult really is. And Church Militant was definitely a cult, and Voris is definitely a cult leader, and he just moved it down to Houston. Jim Zarvos is a cult leader with Paradigm Shift, no doubt in my mind. And we've got to look at the red flags so that, like I said, not all nonprofits are ethical. Remember, they did not Church Militant did not hold a board meeting the entire time that they were in existence, which was against the bylaws of the IRS code system. You're supposed to hold at least one annual meeting, and they never did. They never did. I had a board member that confirmed that with me. So right away, they're not ethical. All right. He's doing the very same thing in Houston. So you've got to be aware of the signs. Even with nonprofits, you have to be aware of nonprofits. Just because they say nonprofit, you know what that means, folks? It's a tax exemption. It's a tax exemption. That's why there's so many nonprofits. I really, really wish there would be some regulation around that. And I mean fair regulation. A lot of people, donors, are getting hosed. I mean, this one person wrote to me, and I'm not going to say her name. I'm not going to say the position she's in. She gave Church Militant a lot of money for the evening news program. And she personally wrote me and said she was sickened by how her money was spent, and they ended up closing down evening news. Now, if you think, Sadie, that that's ethical, Forrest should have given her money back. If you think it's ethical for people to not make enough money to live on their own, I mean, think about that. They didn't earn a living wage. They didn't have health insurance. I've not only talked about this, but Father Imperato has talked about it as well. So I'm not the only one. Okay. I've got more coming up. Did you guys see the video on the drone earlier today? My own backyard, practically, drone sightings. And so, that was just a funny story that my hairdresser sent it to me, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And little old Carmel, Indiana, drones. and this is the thing. They're not drones during the day, they're drones at night. So what are they looking for, right? What are they looking for? Okay, everyone. Let's remind everyone that eternal life is forever. Got a plan? And we're promised in 1 John chapter 2, verse 25. And this is the promise which he made us, life everlasting. We have to continue to pray for Michael Voris, for all those involved. Joseph, okay. Do you know what happened to the rest of the staff at CM? I do know what happened to some of them. And my cutest story, which I told, I think a week ago, Ronan Terrence, who was an editor at Church Militant, and he edited some of my stuff, a video editor, very good. He's done video editing for my Savvy Sales Lady YouTube channel. Some of the videos, you can see the difference between his editing of my videos and my editing of my videos. But I paid him to do a few of my videos, my promo videos. And he is now working at the Blaze TV in Glenn Beck's studios there. So he is doing promo editing for the Blaze TV. So I was really, really thrilled to see that Ronan moved to Dallas and is working for Blaze TV. So that was really good to know. He moved in July, and then he got married. Then he moved in July. So, all righty, everyone. Let's continue to pray for each other. I will pray for you as well. And I really, really do want to say thank you for supporting me, being on my videos with me, keeping me company as I do this. It's always nice to chat in the chat room with everyone. And if I don't see you before Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. And I hope you're surrounded with love and family. And if you're not, my heart is with you, because I will be in the same boat. And I wish you all a happy holiday as well. So I'll see you soon. And God bless you all. And let's pray for everyone. Bye-bye.